You've got your okay. Good morning, everyone. You're at the Social Media Denver Meetup Frame the Conversation Hangout, and we meet the Tuesday before the third Friday of every month, because on the third Friday of every month we have an in real life meetup where Webolutions, our sponsor, helps us learn more about social media and how we can use that as a social marketing tool for our businesses. I'm here today with John Dietrich. John is not even in Denver, even though we're speaking to a group of Denverites. John's not in Denver, but John was one of the first people who introduced me, or actually helped me get comfortable with Google+. And that's when I got on Google+ in a big way, which was in July of 2013. John was one of the first people to raise his hand and say, let me know if there's anything you need. I'm here to answer your questions, which was exactly what I needed at the time. And it also set the stage for what I would find out to be the culture of Google+. So John really made me, he introduced me to the idea of we're here to engage. Which was a little bit different than what I was experiencing on other social media platforms. So, John, thank you very much for being here. And I'd like you to introduce yourself. Let us know what you do.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Debbie. I remember meeting you, when you first came on to Google+. I had been here, I suppose, 6 or 8 months prior to that, and really was struck by the culture that I found here also. That culture of engagement. People were here more professionally, it seemed to me, than they were on other social networks. People weren't just sharing what they had for lunch, but they were talking about, well, what they were doing online to help their business gain exposure, or how to meet people, professional people in their niche, or other bloggers, or to learn from people who had done it well before them. And that's kind of what I came in initially to do, was to understand how to further search engine optimization initially, but then I started meeting people, and with Michael Bennett actually started gplusgeek.com, which is kind of, initially it was a way to help people understand how to use Google Plus in short 3 to 4 minute segments. Because when we first got here, Michael and I got here about the same time, we realized that it can be difficult at first to understand all the different things you can do on Google+. So we started gplusgeek.com to kind of help give people tips and tricks for how to use Google+. There's a lot of different options out here. And now, more recently, it's evolved into helping businesses use Google+. So specifically, the relationship between Google+ and other Google services. So, a lot of people talk about, well, Google+, my customers really aren't there, or I've never been there, so it's kind of something I don't want to do. But once you start seeing the connection between Google+ and, say, YouTube, or Google+ and Google Search, then the value of Google+ begins to manifest itself, if you will. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm doing sort of an interview series, talking to people who are currently using Google+ as a platform for their businesses, how they're doing that, what they're doing to be successful in that arena. So we're really having a good time.
And we're going to be talking about this content mapping, and particularly for businesses, so that you can become a thought leader. That's the topic of our meetup on Friday. That's what we're going to be shaping the conversation around. And you and I have found that we came to Google+ mostly to find out how, well, you and I think, both had an interest in SEO search, which I think is the absolute, that is the reason to be on Google+. If you want to be found, then you should be, playing around here in Google+. But then we got here and found out that it's ideal for businesses, and at the same time, it's not really used to promote businesses. So it's ironic in a way. It somehow takes out the ickiness of the self-promotion and the business aspect of it. But I have never had more business conversations on a social platform anywhere else. yet they're done in a way where we're helping each other, just very much like the way you and I met. You helped me, I could ask questions, and then we get to watch each other, look at each other's websites. I love being able to go to a G Plus profile, for example, and find out what communities do you moderate, if your profile is filled out well. Now we have, just before we get started too deep into this, I want to say good morning to Sandra, who has been, I think she's been at every single one of our Hangouts, and she's saying good morning to Sheila, who's in the UK and checked in at about 4 hours ago. So I don't know if she's still online now, but she was here. So good morning, Sandra, and thank you for being here. John Harris is also here, and I believe he's probably got his coffee in hand. And good morning, Heather. And Heather points out, too, that, John, you were very helpful to her when she got started, and she continues to learn from you. And that brings me back, then, to the fact that on your site, you have these 3 or 4 minute videos that, when I think about content mapping or creating, establishing yourself as a thought leader, you and Michael have done a great job of creating 3 or 4 minute videos, and I think that's significant. It's not an hour-long HOA that somebody has to sit through and sift through a lot of information. So if I can start with that, for example, as a way of strategically using a strategy to decide what kind of content, specifically the 3 or 4 minute videos. What were you thinking about when you came up with that idea?
Well, okay, so there's a few things. You touched on one of them, being that people don't often have an hour or even half an hour. Michael and I both found that we were very busy. We had jobs, we had office jobs where we were 9 to 5, at the office doing other work, and we didn't have an hour anywhere in that day, to watch a long hangout. But the idea being 3 or 4 minutes, we had that. We had 3 or 4 minutes, and that it could be focused on a particular topic. So, if I watch an hour-long hangout, unless I take detailed notes, there's just no way I'm going to remember all that information. But 3 or 4 minutes worth of information is kind of doable. It's kind of, I can remember that. And then also, we had the idea that everyone's doing hour-long hangouts or half-hour hangouts. We need a niche. We need to stand out. We need a reason to show people that we're different. That we've got a little different approach. And we feel that the 3 or 4 minute, format really helps us do 2 things. Stand out, be a niche, and also provide that kind of quick, usable content that people can gather as they go along. So goal setting was important for us, kind of sitting down ahead of time and getting an idea of where we want to go with things, how to map, our strategy to people's needs. And then it became developing an audience that was interested in what we had to say. That means sharing relevant content that's related to Google Plus and using Google Plus for extending your reach online or building your influence or your authority, presenting yourself as an authority in a topic area. This is something Google is very interested in, actually, with their Google authorship program that they started a while back in, I think, 2012 was when the program started. But that's kind of a way of Google looking to understand how relevant you are to the topics you're writing about, how authoritative you are in the topics you're writing about, So, eventually they would like to be able to take 2 pieces of similar content, but be able to understand, well, this was written by someone who's authoritative in that field, so we could then present that to people a little more highly in search. So that's kind of their goal. So this idea, going back to authority and mapping content to your audience is we found important,
So one of the reasons for using content mapping, and I know I don't know a lot about content mapping, only what I read on the internet, but these days, you know, that's my source of information. So one of the steps in content mapping is to know your business's goals and then to understand the audience that you're speaking to or with. And I do believe that most businesses these days, if they haven't articulated it, they probably mean to, is to be findable in Google search. I mean, that's got to be, that these days you need to be, you need to have a presence that is findable in Google search.
Yes.
So, you know, because you and I are both, you know, very much into Google Plus, we understand the significance of Google Plus and being found in Google search.
Yes.
So that, you know, it seems like now anymore, if you're going to start content mapping, and part of content mapping is to help you choose the technologies that you're going to use to interact with your market, whether it's to monitor and listen or to distribute, you know, content. The content mapping will help you use the technologies, and I do believe inevitably that Google is going to be in that strategy someplace because you need to be able to be found on Google. So that being said, I was going through your 3 or 4 minute videos, and I hope that what you'll do is put a link to your videos, which they're also linked on your G Plus profile, but that one video in particular where you spoke with somebody who works on the marketing for a doctor, specifically, because I mean that takes us out of the Google Plus. We're all in the Google Plus business, so you know, so to speak. You had a doctor on one of your 4 minute videos talk about Google and about the way he used content to become a resource. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was his name is Bradford Lowry, and he is the VP of online marketing for a company called Doctors Health. And Doctors Health, as he related, I'll put the link here in the chat.
Okay.
Basically, the Doctors Health started in 2010, and it was intended to bridge the gap between the medical, like the modern medical profession, and like the holistic, you know, nutrition-based approach to medicine. So this doctor wanted to bridge that gap, and so he came up with a product that he found was helpful to his patients recovering from surgeries. So he would give his patients this product. And anyway, so he hired Brad to build his reputation, for one, online. Something that was happening before they started this process was that you would type in this doctor's name and no information about him would come up in search. You know, so one of their initial goals was that, well, when you type in his name, we need information about this particular doctor to come up in search. So they used Google Plus as a kind of way to build his online reputation, and found a lot of success doing that. And then also they needed to gain exposure for their websites. You know, they had a product that they were offering, and so how do you build web traffic? How do you get that product in front of the right people? And there again, you're looking for a qualified audience, not just a big audience. So they used Google Plus, and they have found a lot of success using Google Plus communities. So what they did was they put together, I think, 2 or 3 communities, you know, related to the topics surrounding their product and service. Most of their product, they don't have a service, but so they put together communities related to their product, and then they developed these communities, and then I believe they had a blog that was associated with each community. So then they had, you know, Google Plus communities, blogs, and then their main website, and they used this whole ecosystem to really significantly improve the visits to their website. And you can see all this in more detail in that video I posted the link to. But I was very, very interested and pleased to see how they were using Google Plus as the focal point to this broader online marketing strategy that was working and has been working very, very well for them.
So the way you describe it right now, I could actually visualize, and it helped that you use hand motions, but I could actually visualize this, and that's another strength or another reason to do content mapping, because when you lay it out like that, it helps you to focus on the focal point, which in their case was Google Plus at the center, and then they had their communities and their website, and so they could see visually. So they knew that their starting point for information about what they were offering was at the center, and went out from there. And I liked, you said a couple of things. You said that he was targeting or serving patients recovering from surgery. He wasn't just going out to the general public. They were patients, and they were specific patients. They were recovering from surgery, and that's part of the content mapping piece as well, is know specifically who you're speaking to. Don't do that, where they say you throw it against the wall and see what sticks. You want to have a qualified, you use that term too, a qualified audience driven to your website. And then he does it through communities. Now, you may not be able to answer this question, but did he have any difficulty, or what techniques did he use to get those people into the communities? Because Google is intimidating, and people might rather use a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group because they're more familiar with that. But Google communities, once you get them there, they seem to be really, really powerful. So do you know what process he might have, or challenges that he encountered?
Well, I know a little bit, like you said, not a lot about it, but he'd be able to speak more directly to that. But I think that one of the things he used, one of the techniques he used, was being his own brand advocate. So he, as his personal profile, Brad Lowry's profile, would go around and, interact on topically relevant posts. So he would find people talking about health and wellness, and then he would maybe comment on those posts, and maybe reshare those posts, and kind of become a known member of the broader Google Plus community, and then eventually, building those relationships, be able to say, by the way, we have this growing community, that is related to health and wellness, or doctors and medicine, nutrition, those kind of things, and could then build back towards that. His is a public community. I think yours is a private community. So there's going to be some pretty significant differences. I'm actually right now helping to moderate and grow a private community for a tool called Nodex. And so the strategies we're using are a little different. It's a little more one-on-one. It's a little more, it's a slower process. But you can really grow that qualified audience of people who are really, really interested in what you're talking about. So you can get kind of a more engagement per post than, say, you would on a post that was in more of a public space. So it's a little different.
Right, and it again, I feel like we've almost capitulated and said, okay, social media is a crapshoot in a lot of respects. You put stuff out there, you hope that the right person happens to be on Twitter at the time that you post it, and you kind of guess when they might be, and when you're talking about, what you just described as a process using Google Plus, it is more one-on-one, and you do have to very intentionally go out, find people who are talking about the topic that you can address, and then wait for the opportunity to help, to offer a suggestion, to mention that, oh, and by the way, this is what's on my website. It's not promoting. It's done much more tastefully as far as I'm concerned, but it's a different way of doing it. I mean, on Twitter, you had the 140 character, and I mentioned Twitter a lot because I've spent a lot of time on Twitter. But you do really, it's like, oh, I've got 140 characters. It needs to be a keyword. You're talking about all these tactics. Whereas when we're talking about how we behave on Google Plus, it's much more relational. And you know that, I know that. But if you're used to using other social platforms, it's a bit of a foreign concept. You mentioned communities, which Anybody who spends any time on Google Plus knows that the communities they're just a wonderful place to go. And Heather Crafter is in the audience right now, and I'm in her community, her craft shack community, where we do crafting. And it's, that's a very niche market. But one of the things that she and I, we have 3 moderators. I'm one of her moderators in our community. But you go in and you have one-on-one conversations. And when somebody, in the case of the crafters community, when somebody posts a piece of artwork that they've done, I am compelled to go see their website and see what else they have. And we have found out that within her community, she's got some really incredibly talented people, and the conversations have become richer and richer and richer. She hit 100 members recently, and so it's a little over that right now, which is a small community compared to some of the others, but you don't need to be speaking to the world. What she has is 100 people who really like to do what she does. And so you don't waste your time, yelling into that empty cave. And so with Google, I think I mentioned to you, I Googled content mapping to pull up a few articles to see what's out there. And the most recent one I found is 18 months old. It's fairly general. It doesn't talk about specific tools to use or digital platforms to use. It talks in generalities, but a lot of it really is just sort of still broadcasting. And Google is so not broadcasting. It's way more listening and interacting one-on-one.
Yeah, and it's matching content to people who are interested in seeing that content. Like you said, Heather's community, it's 100 people who are really into crafts. I don't want 1,000 people who some of them are into crafts and most of them aren't. I want 100 people who really want to be involved in talking about crafts and doing crafts. If you're talking about tools and sort of some more technical ways of finding, these relationships and these people who are interested in the topics that you're talking about, going back to Nodex I mentioned earlier, it is a tool, a social. I guess you can call it a social network analysis tool. That's kind of a more techie term. It's really a way of connecting content with people who want to see that content, and also finding those people within a topic that are influential to that topic. So let's say if I were to share, say, a post about crafts to my audience, it probably wouldn't go much of anywhere because my audience isn't interested in crafts. But if Heather were to share that to her community, she gets much more interaction because she's an influencer within her audience. So Nodex is able to, we can see that as human beings very easily because we've gotten to know one another and we can see those relationships. Nodex is able to do that on a very large scale across Google Plus very quickly. You can begin identifying those people who are influencers within their niche very quickly, and it'll actually go out. You basically set up a project with a hashtag or a keyword, and it goes out and it collects all the posts from Google Plus. It also has you can upgrade and get Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and news and blog data, but it's free for members of the Google Plus community. So it'll go out and it'll collect all the posts that have, let's say, the hashtag, Google Plus for Business or content marketing or online marketing, and it will then start analyzing those posts for you and bringing out influencers for you to then go and say, hey, is this person really influential? Do I want to build a relationship with them? Is this a person that I might want to get the content that I'm producing in front of? And it can do that on a scale that you just can't do by yourself, so to speak. So I really enjoy using Nodex and helping businesses and people using Google Plus understand how they can use it and apply it to their content, to their activity on Google Plus, etc.
So that's another strategic tool. And again, the stuff that I found on the internet about content mapping is slightly dated. And these days, new stuff is coming out all the time. And I'm glad you brought up the Nodex because before we had this, before we got together today, I went and checked your G Plus profile again, find out what's going on, what's new with you. I checked Nodex. Now, help me understand this, because even as a person who spends a lot of time on Google, I felt slightly intimidated, and I'm sure that you can reassure me.
Yeah.
I went on and to set up my account on Nodex, and it gives you that message that says you are giving Nodex access to your circles.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that always can you help me understand what's the purpose of that, and reassure me that I'm not I'm being infiltrated?
Yes, basically that is Google's. There's an API Google puts out there for developers. An API is essentially a way of connecting your tool, in this case Nodex, to Google's data. This data is all public if you choose it to be public. That's one of the benefits of Google Plus, is that we have circles, and we can say, well, I want only these people to see this post, or only one person, or everyone in the world. So Nodex respects that, in fact it has to respect that, because Google's API is constructed in such a way to maintain our privacy. So it will only collect data that we set as public, that you could find individually by doing a search in Google Plus. So all that's doing is but you have to give permission to Nodex to do that. You have to say, yes, I trust Nodex, and I trust the people who have built Nodex, that's Lee Smallwood, to not, I guess, exploit my data. As we're trusting Google Plus not to exploit our data, as we're trusting Google not to exploit our data. That's simply saying, do you trust this person with your public data?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it's asking there.
That's what it is. Okay, well, I'm not the only one who's glad you brought it up. Heather Crafter also said that she was intimidated, and so Heather and we tend to tag team on a lot of things. So Heather, just I will go ahead and complete my registration for it, because I'm interested in this tool, and influencers, getting back to the content mapping and establishing yourself as an authority or a thought leader. Influencers need to be part of that strategy. If you haven't thought about it as you're developing your own content map, or your strategy for becoming a thought leader, you want to have influencers, because again, it goes back to the search thing, and I want to come back to the search and communities. If you've got influencers who are sharing your information or commenting on your information, that also it increases your digital footprint. Part of the Google's plan, or Google's process, is to not only see what you're talking about, but who else is seeing what you're talking about, and who else is interacting with what you're talking about. And influencers are going to be very, very important in that part of the strategy. Heather also talks about the community, and what's so great about it is that the search function, let me see if I can see her comment here. I really love the G Plus communities because they are also included in the search and add to authority. They are also searchable so well within the community. Of course, it needs to be public for that, and that's I go into her community and use the search function, which is much, much stronger than just the general search function in Google Plus. I mean, it can be more fine-tuned. And then Sheila is here, by the way. Sheila, I'm glad you're here, because we talked about John's interview with the 4-minute video, and a doctor, or it was a physician's group, a doctor's group, and Sheila works with surgeons.
This is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that she's going to especially. Sheila, if you didn't already see, John put a link to that particular interview. It's 4 minutes long. It's good, though, about how they use Google Plus for a medical industry. But I just love the private community in G Plus, especially to bring in a client who is unused to G Plus. Thank you for saying that, Sheila, because that's one of the challenges. If we're going to rely on G Plus, we need our audience to be in G Plus, and it can be difficult. She also curates stuff, and I do see that I'm a member of one of her communities where she keeps track of information that's really important to get back to later, and then it's easy for the rest of the community to find as well. So a lot of things going on here where Google Plus becomes very important. Let me just take a look here. I want to say good morning to Steve, because Steve is in real life, he and I in fact have worked on client projects together, and he's here in Denver, and I would love to have him on an HOA one day when I can talk him into it. And then let's see. Oh, John is bringing up this good point. In the way we trusted Facebook not to exploit our data, still a bit on the fence with this. And this, I think, is a common concern, particularly when we see messages. Like I said, when I went to sign up for Nodex, it asked me, can I have access? But most things do say, grant access.
Because I've thought about this a lot, and a lot of people have asked me, well, you're trusting Google with a lot of your data. What incentive does Google have not to exploit your data? Well, their incentive is their reputation. Facebook's reputation is not what it once was, and that's in large part due to the fact that they did not respect their users' data. Google understands, I think, as well, if not better than any company I've ever come in contact with, the value of the data that there is in their hands, so to speak. If they don't treat it with respect, people quickly these days become aware of that, and they'll move to the competitor. So I find that not only does Google have an ethos of trust, of respect of users' data, but they have a very solid business reason to treat that data well, and to not use it in an exploitive way, and not just give it out, to some online marketing firm or something, of that nature. Because if they start doing it, their bottom line is hurt. And if a company's bottom line is on the line, so to speak, they're not going to do it. They're business people. They realize the value of our data, and if they start exploiting it, we're going to go away, and their whole platform, which is based on advertising revenue in Google AdWords, is gone. And now, well, with their integrating AdWords with Google Plus more and more, we can see, or at least I see, a lot of people do see, the value that they're placing on our data, and with how much respect they're treating it. So I think that if you're going to trust your data with anyone, I think Google is a decent place to put your trust.
And so, yeah, it will be interesting to watch. Facebook is providing us with a good case study on this topic in particular, because they have chosen a particular path, and it has created all kinds of discussion. A lot of people, are kind of turning their backs now on Facebook because they feel that Facebook has turned their back on them. So that'll be interesting, and hopefully, if there were mistakes made in Facebook, Google will use that as a cue not to make those same kinds of mistakes. So yeah, we are sort of at the mercy. You can't use computers without feeling like your privacy is somewhat compromised. But the alternative is to not use computers. And frankly, I can't exercise that alternative. I live on the computer. So
well, it's up to us what data we share. The data that I share about myself, I'm happy to let people know about. I'm now a small business person, a kind of a solopreneur, as they say, and my reputation is very tied to what I do. So I'm very glad that people know who I am, that people can rely on me, that people know, what I say I'll do, that kind of thing. And so I share the kind of data that I'm happy for people to have. I want people to have. I've got, my personal life, the things that I eat for lunch, when I mow my lawn, that kind of stuff. I don't put that out there. I'm not interested in sharing that information. It's just simply not. Google simply doesn't have it. So it's up to us as users to share the kind of data that we don't mind. In fact, we want to be public. We want our reputation to be tied with what we do online.
That's what I'm really loving about what's going on here on Google, because it makes you aware of the fact that you need to be accountable. You
Yes.
have to be accountable for your own. If you don't want the world to know it, don't put it on the internet. We've all heard that. Or better yet, don't do it. Because
Right.
maybe somebody else might be standing by with a cell phone and a video going. So if you would be embarrassed about that kind of behavior, for the world to know, then maybe you shouldn't do that. And hopefully that is shaping our behavior in general.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We were talking. I went to a local meetup here in Jackson. It was a tech entrepreneur meetup, and the presenter was the CEO of the Better Business Bureau here in the state of Mississippi, and he was talking about online reputations and these kind of services like Angie's List, where plumbers and electricians and everything will go out and put a profile up, and then people can rate them, give them a star rating. Well, the problem very quickly became those individuals found that the more ratings they got, the more business they got. So they'd go out and they'd hire their cousin or their brother to go and give them a bunch of reviews, and that waters the whole thing down, and you can't really trust it anymore. And it's because it's not tied to those individuals giving the reviews. No one knows that it's the guy's cousin, because the guy's cousin doesn't have to put up any kind of profile that says who he is. He can just put up any review he wants. Google has, I think, a very, very good idea to tie what we do say online to who we are, and that keeps us honest. That means I can't just go out there and do all these black hat SEO techniques anymore, because what I'm doing is tied to who I am in real life. And that's the kind of thing. I would want that if the internet didn't exist. I would want my reputation in my local community to be sterling. I would want what I do to be recognized in the community for being honest and full of integrity, and those things that we all want, and those things that really help us build and maintain the kind of relationships we need to be successful as a business living in a community. This is simply the extension of that on the internet. Now we have the opportunity to build the kind of reputation we have in real life. Lawyers do this, doctors do this. They've got reputations in their communities, but they have no reputation online. Google is now providing them and presenting us the opportunity to extend that reputation to an online community, which is much larger, than our local community was. So really, I find it a very good model, for extending reputation.
You know what? And I'm going to actually use that soundbite that you just said there, John, because that's powerful. And I can almost see Sheila jumping up and down in her chair, because you mentioned specifically doctors have great reputations already, and now Google helps them, gives them a way to get it online and let the world know about it. Yeah. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons that when I come to Google, I'm always overwhelmed, and maybe, I don't know, I don't think I'm being naive, but the quality of the people that I'm finding on Google seems to be so much higher. One, because Google has really just taken the world by the throat and said, you will not game this system, which is, that whole hummingbird thing that happened last August, where the algorithm changed, that made it much more difficult to do the black hat SEO. So if you're watching this right now and this all sounds foreign to you, basically it's Google using semantic search, intention and influence and authority to establish yourself digitally, without saying, all right, I'm just going to stuff this blog post with a bunch of keywords. And even though they're not relevant to this, but I know that people are searching it. That's black hat SEO, where people used to game the system. That's becoming less and less possible. And the people who really appreciate that are the people then who flocked to Google+. And then, so now we all find ourselves surrounded by other people who understand that accountability is important, that we have to live, we have to walk the talk. If we're going to be here talking about how great we are, we better be great. And if you're not great, just sit back and be quiet and learn how to be great from the people who are around you, because there are plenty of great people here. So you just learn, and then when you start, I think, I've run into only a handful of people who have been shooting off their mouth only to find out that when you pull back the curtain, they aren't really what they said they were. And you know what? Guess what? I get to uncircle them.
That's
I
right.
get to, you know,
That's
that
right.
it's they no longer have access to me. I just uncircle them, so I no longer get their stuff. And so Google, I think, is doing a good job of helping to create a place where we can be who we say we are, and we can say who we are with, great, with confidence and conviction. So, getting back to the content mapping and becoming an authority, if you really, in fact, are an authority, it's not a matter of using the right words and being in the right places. It's a matter of actually being an authority. So
Yes.
that might be at the beginning of your strategy, how to establish yourself as an authority. Well, let's see. How about start out by being an authority? And what better place to expose yourself totally than on Google Plus, because they make it so that if you aren't an authority, you will be exposed.
Right.
And so this seems like a great place if you actually are an authority.
Yeah, they've removed the incentive for gaming the system. Because if you start, because now it takes as long to build a genuine reputation on Google Plus and online as it does to game the system. So in essence, you might as well follow the right path, because following the wrong path takes just as long or longer, and the results are much, much less impressive, so to speak. So yeah, the idea is that you have a sterling reputation in your local, in real life, so to speak, community. Google gives you the opportunity of extending that onto the internet. Not just Google Plus, but Google Search, YouTube, Gmail, Google AdWords, the whole ecosystem of Google products and services, which is very extensive. Now they're giving people the opportunity to extend their reputation into that ecosystem. And now people don't want to be advertised to. They don't want to be lied to anymore. They want to find genuine people. I think this tech bubble that we experienced, and this social media craze that we saw back in 2005 or so, it's disingenuous in many ways. People just posting to post, and people saying, oh, I'm this great authority, and then people find out after a while maybe that wasn't the case. Google has compressed all that and said, look, if you're not who you say you are, no one's going to be interested, so go away. If you are who you say you are, that's great. Build your reputation, be genuine, be an authority. And if you are those things, you'll be discovered as those things. You kind of don't have to even say that you are an authority or whatever. You are or you aren't, and that will be quickly found out.
And again, getting back to becoming an authority. What better place to do it than on Google, because they have this authorship program.
Yeah.
And they are the search, the largest. I want to say they're the only search engine in the world these days, because it's the only one I use. But when you think about how are your customers finding you, or how is your market finding you, they're probably going to Google first. So
Yep.
again, I think that we've made that point quite clear, that Google Plus needs to be a big part of that. If you're going to establish yourself as an authority, then do it on Google Plus, with the caveat that if in fact you're not an authority, if in fact you're not a thought leader, then take some time to become one before you expose yourself as a fraud. Because and it's something that I've said about social media since I've been in the social media field. Social media still is a tool, whether you're using Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or Google Plus. It's still only a tool, and it will help to attract attention. Some platforms are more effective at that than others, but it will attract attention, and then it's like a spotlight, and you're on stage. But if you're up there and you don't know the words to the song, and you don't know the steps to the dance, and you don't have the right, stage dress on, costume, you're going to totally screw up that production.
That's right.
So before you attract attention to yourself, make sure that you can actually live up to that reputation that you're, labeling yourself with. And I really like the idea, again, talking about becoming a thought leader. I like the idea that becoming a thought leader is not a matter of telling people you're a thought leader.
No.
It's allowing yourself to be discovered as a thought leader. And on Google Plus, it seems so much easier to do that if in fact you are a thought leader, because the complexity, even though it is a little complex, once people are on Google Plus, they know how to use it to find what they want to look at, find the information. And if you're a thought leader in that area, they're going to find you because you post regularly about it, because you're on HOAs and people can see you and hear you and do that sort of thing, and find out, oh yeah, that person really does know what they're talking about there. And it gives an easy way, to me, if you don't have your Google Plus profile filled out, Sandra, you might want to put a link to your HOA about how to fill out your Google Plus profile. I found that one to be very, very helpful, because that's really important, and people can come to one place on Google Plus, see how you interact with others, and then find out where your other connections are through your Google Plus profile, and say, yeah, you know what, they are who they say they are. I see that they are consistently talking about the same kind of stuff and giving the same good information.
Yeah, and even employers, this is a point that Joe Napolitani raised to me. It was another person that I interviewed a week or so ago. He said employers, and this is very true, what they'll do as soon as they interview you, or even before they interview you, they'll get your resume and they'll Google your name. And what you can do with Google Plus is provide an opportunity for you to come up in search when they do that, because they're going to do it, and they're going to do it more and more. So what you want to be is active on Google Plus, so that when they do that, they'll find you, and then they can see your reputation. They can see, oh, well, this resume is really matching up to what they're saying, because I've heard several stories of people just blatantly lying on their resume to get jobs. I mean, I think there was even a Harvard professor a few years back, who had made up all kinds of stuff on her resume, and she was hired, and it took them a while, but once they found out, it was just like this entire scandal, and that kind of thing is what we want to avoid. It's what we're trying to avoid with a genuine, real reputation online, and Google has given us a real opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and like you said, it took them some time to figure that out. I think it's going to take less and less time these days for people. And you know what, we said, if you don't want to be found out doing something, then don't do it and don't put it on Google. But if you do want to be found out about what you're doing, put it on Google.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, to become a thought leader, if in fact you are a thought leader, put it on Google, and the job starts to get done for you. Basically, all you really have to do then is breathe. Do the things that you normally do during your day. Write blog posts. Or if you're reading a book, one of the things I like to do when I'm on my Kindle reader is I will get, you can report that you're partway through a book. You could report your progress, and I often read books about this industry. So I say, yeah, report my progress on Twitter that I'm 35%, through this book. Then the author is notified that you're reading the book. Your network is notified that you're reading the book, and if it's a book in the industry, they realize you're investing in continual learning, and there's all kinds of things that can come out of that. You're not promoting yourself, you're just saying, I'm reading this book, I'm 35% of the way through, it's easy to report it on my Kindle, it goes out onto my social network, and it's just me breathing, basically.
You're extending your reputation, which you have in your own living room, but now you're telling everyone else, this is who I am. I'm really interested in these topics, I'm really researching these topics, and quickly people will find, well, hey, Debbie knows what she's talking about. And that's not something you ever said, but what you did was provided people the opportunity to see what you're doing in a professional sense. It's not that you're writing about what you're having for lunch or whatever. What you're putting out there publicly is information that's building your reputation, is extending your reputation to people who are interested in seeing your reputation. And like you said, Google is able to provide the kind of tool where people can very quickly find exactly what they're looking for. That's a big part of Google search and Google's ethos in general, is connecting people with exactly the most relevant information they possibly can as quickly as they can. And that goes back to Google's, having a real need to maintain balance. They have a real business need to provide the best information possible. And so when you're putting out that kind of information that people want to see, Google wants to then connect the two of you together. It's not about huge audiences and whatever. It's about a one-to-one relationship. The people who want to find you, Google wants to connect with you. And if that's just one person and you and I in a single hangout, that's what they want to produce. That's what they want to facilitate. And I think it's a brilliant model. And a lot of it comes from AdWords, which is an ability of connecting your services with the people who are searching relevant, related information. And so your ad will only display to the people who are really interested in seeing it. And it's I think very helpful. To me, I don't like billboards on the road because it's usually not relevant to me. Mm-hmm. What I want to see is information that's interesting to me or that I am wanting to learn more about. And if I'm not seeing that, I'm not interested. It's almost like I put blinders on. I don't even look at billboards anymore. I'm looking at the road or I'm thinking about something else. But Google provides us tools to really connect with the people who are interested in hearing what we have to say or the services that we have to provide. And we can connect our reputations to those services and those products. So not only do I have the opportunity of finding relevant products and services, but I have the opportunity of purchasing them or using them in coordination with people that I've grown to know, that I really have a relationship with. I would much prefer to spend my money with someone that I know than someone I don't know, because I know them. Like, I know their reputation. I know let's say they have a family. I want to support that. I'm a big proponent of families, so I'd like to spend my money with families. Or a local person. I like my local economy. I want to help my local economy grow. So I'd like to spend my money with local businessmen. It's the same concept, and I think it's brilliant, I think.
It is brilliant, and it's kind of amazing that the people we know now are not just the people in our local neighborhoods, because like you and I know each other. Right. Heather Crafter and I and Sheila, we've never met each other in person, and I talk to both of these women several times a week, and they are and yes, I trust them and they trust me. And so the Google thing, it really has, I think thought leadership is an element, but given the ability now to build relationships and to validate trust, to experience trust through Google, because again, you really are exposed when you put yourself on there. But if you've got if you've got some great things to reveal, then why not? So all those elements come together. And I think that as part of establishing yourself as a thought leader, you have to look at the benefits that can be appreciated through using Google Plus as part of that strategy.
Yeah, because like you were saying, if you are a thought leader, well, you want people to find you as a thought leader. And Google provides the tools to do exactly that. Where I've not seen the same opportunities being provided by any other network. If you are who you say you are, then you'll be found, and people will find you interesting, people will find you valuable, and the tools Google is providing allow us to do that. You're sitting in your living room, you're a thought leader. Well, that's great, but no one's interested in you being a thought leader in your living room. If you really are, Google gives you the opportunity to present that to the world, so to speak. And we can build relationships with people across the world very, very, very much more easily than we ever could before. Video chat's been around, but never have I connected with people all around the world until very recently with Google Plus. Even though technically I could have, this network is different. It's really quite a bit different, I think, than anything else we've ever seen as a society, as a world. You know, it's breaking down barriers that have never been broken down before, and it's really interesting to be a part of that.
I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I feel like I may be a little ahead of the curve when I compare myself to my in real life network, but when I get into Google, I feel like I've got so much catching up to do. So, you know, that kind of balances it. And this whole conversation, like I needed to be more fired up about Google, but you know, it just between the two of us, just on this conversation alone, and the folks who have been contributing, again, thank you in the comments about the way they use Google. And that, John, we have, you know, some really good comments over there. So afterwards, you know, you might want to just take a look at it and see, you know, some of the comments, you know, really insightful things about how people are using Google Plus, communities, authenticity is not even a word that's been mentioned, because I think we're supposed to stop using that word. I don't know. I like it, but accountability is the A word that I'm going to use. Is I love the accountability. We're down to the end here, and I thank you so much for bringing your perspective, particularly around Google Plus, and helping me tie it into the meetup conversation of using your online presence and content mapping to establish your authority and become a thought leader. Thank you, you know, for particularly though emphasizing Google's role in that. And so if people are not using Google, if people are not planning to use Google as part of that strategy, I think you've made some great points today for why they need to stop and look at the benefits that they could be missing out on if they don't use Google. I want to ask you to close up here, John, with a call to action. Tell us how we can get to know you. I don't know you as well as I'd like to know you, and I've known you for a little while here, but tell us how we can get to know you better, and let us know, you know, specifically what we should be doing, you know, to be more involved with you.
Well, I appreciate you having me so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you more. You know, like you said, we've met a little while back, but it's really great to kind of extend that relationship and build that relationship, and provide the opportunity of talking to the other people commenting here. You're right. I'm going to go look through these comments because they look like they're really some very quality comments. But if you'd like to get to know me better, I'd love to get to know you better too. You know, I'm on Google Plus, obviously, but if gplusgeek.com is a place where we're providing short 3 to 4 minute interview style tips and tricks, so to speak, on how better to use Google Plus for your business and your reputation and your authority. The platform can be a little intimidating at first, but part of that is because of the opportunity it presents. It's very in depth. There's a lot you can do with it. Hangouts on air are a very, very important part of I think, any online business strategy. There's a lot of talk about people wanting to get into the story of your business. Google is providing us the kind of tools that we need to tell our story and to you know, bring people into our conversation. And so, you know, again, I appreciate you having me here, and if you'd like to be part of my conversation, gplusgeek.com or my profile on Google Plus. You know, you can find me there, and I'd really love to connect with you more.
Great, and you know, one of the challenges that we have in bringing people to Google is that it can be difficult to use, and so G Plus Geek is, you know, I love the 3 and 4 minute formats, so that can be very helpful if you are trying to bring your you know, your potential market or your customers to Google Plus. G Plus Geek, just, you know, shoot them a couple of the videos and say, here, spend 4 minutes on this one. This may be helpful. And then my call to action, I'm in Denver. This is the social marketing group of Denver. Our conversation framing the conversation that we're going to have at our meetup on Friday. By the way, I will not be at the meetup on Friday, just to let folks know, because I'm going to be up in the mountains. And then on Saturday, the 17th of May, 2014, we're having an in real life hangout at Chautauqua Park. I have an event out. I'll send that out again. Chautauqua Park, just to get to know some of the people that we've met through Google Plus, and we're all here in Denver, but some of us have not met each other. And so we've got a group going out there. We're going to, everyone bring your picnic basket. We even purchased a permit so that if you want to have, beer or wine or some sort of libation, we have permission to do that. But pack your picnic basket and come out and meet us on Saturday. I think it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So just building more relationships. So again, thank you very much, John. I really, really, really appreciate you being here today. And we'll sign off then on this episode of Social Marketing Group in Denver, Framing the Conversation. So long.